Hey there, Shakers, and welcome back to another episode of Worth Your Salt, the podcast that's here to supercharge your marketing in the health and wellness space. I'm Jennifer Orechwa, StoryBrand certified coach, and over the past 2 decades, my team and I have tested, iterated, and figured out what it takes to market and grow so you don't have to. Now I'm here to help you apply the marketing systems that truly work. At Salt Marketing, we're about helping wellness practitioners like you build trust, authority, and a nonstop flow of clients. So if you're ready to take your practice to the next level, you're in the right place. Let's get started. If you've ever dipped your toes into the Google Ads world and walked away frustrated, confused, or wondering where all your marketing dollars went, then this episode is for you. John Sanders is the straight-talking, strategy-smart founder of RevKey, a digital ad agency that works with therapists. He's not here to sell you on clicks or confuse you with jargon. He is here to show you how ethical, effective advertising can actually bring real clients through your door. So whether you're running a solo practice or scaling a group, John's no BS approach to Google Ads cuts through the fluff and gives you exactly what you need to know to stop wasting money and start growing your practice with confidence. John, I'm so thrilled to welcome you to Worth Your Salt.
Thanks for having me, Jennifer.
So I'd love to start by having you share a little bit of your background and what led you to start RevKey with a focus on therapists.
Sure. So I started with Google Ads all the way back in 2010 as a marketing manager for an industrial supply company of all things, and eventually transitioned into a marketing agency job focused on dentistry, where we were building a Google Ads department for a dental marketing agency. And right around the same time, my wife, who is an assessment psychologist, was starting her practice. So during the day, I'm doing ads for dentists. At night, I'm doing ads for her, and then started to pick up a couple of her friends as, side clients. And then in 2018, just decided I wanted to be the boss. And so I went ahead and started RevKey and have never turned back.
Love that. Yep. And so many of us start out with our passion as a side gig. So it makes perfect sense. And your company's tagline mentions ethical, data-driven Google ads that deliver real client conversions. And I love that focus on real client conversions rather than vanity metrics. So why is concentrating on tangible outcomes like actual client inquiries or bookings, why is that so important for therapists? How does it set your approach apart from the typical marketing fluff?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, you can spend a lot of money on Google Ads and you can spend it on bad search terms. Like you could just put in a keyword of, say, anxiety, and you're going to get people searching for teas for how to solve their, teas that will deal with their anxiety. Or um, another major problem within Google is some of the third-party search engines that they sell their ads to are not really high quality. And so you think that you're advertising on Google, and I've had this happen, many, many times where I've audited somebody's account and said, you're not actually advertising on Google. You're mainly advertising on all of these third-party websites that are really not helping you at all, and are in a lot of cases low quality. And so not necessarily looking at, the overall total number of clicks and, what your click-through rate is, but really kind of looking at, how many conversions did you get? How many of those are, at what percentage did you get those? How much are you paying for each of those conversions? And then kind of stepping beyond the Google Ads side of things and saying, okay, well, we sent you 10 forms last month. Like how many of those actually became clients? So you can actually have an idea of how much your advertising is actually getting you versus going, well, I don't know, which just doesn't feel good. And then Google just becomes, just another charge on your credit card every month. And you're wondering, well, what am I actually getting for all of this money? And if you don't know, I mean, you're more likely gonna stop. And so ultimately, you've got to be able to have that measurement piece. And it's one of the hardest things to put in place within Google. Even harder in some cases than trying to run a campaign in terms of getting that form to fire correctly, or if you've got something like Calendly or Acuity on your website, and making sure that like when somebody fills that out, that actually fires correctly. And it's kind of the tedious technical end of the marketing. But I think that's really probably one of the hardest things, especially if you are a business owner who's trying to do this yourself and like you go in and like make your Google ads, but then like don't really understand how to make that conversion piece. Makes life really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And even beyond the tech piece of it, when you're working with therapists, they understand wellness, they understand mental health, but they don't necessarily understand the unique challenges of marketing in a HIPAA sensitive environment, right? So how does specializing in mental health change the way you approach Google Ads? In other words, how do you do it differently from a generic digital marketer to make sure that the marketing is not just effective, but also appropriate for a therapy practice?
Sure. So I think it's kind of focusing on those terms that, if we're putting in keywords, I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to just put in anxiety and depression or even help with anxiety. I want somebody who's saying anxiety therapy, anxiety treatment, anxiety counseling, as much as possible in that example, and really kind of focusing on keywords that are more actionable to people looking for therapy and not maybe looking for some sort of informational or home-based product solution. I think is one of them. Another thing is like there's a lot of things in Google Ads that I know that I am not allowed to do. For instance, if you look at anything for Google Ads right now, they'll say you should upload all of your first party data, take your customer data, upload it into Google Ads, and then go out and find customers like that. And I know that I should never, ever, ever ask a therapy practice for that. And that would be awful to do. So, um, and in addition to that, one of the things is traditional remarketing. So, like if you go out and start trying to search for a car or you're buying shoes, and then all of a sudden you're seeing ads after that. I know specifically that Google is not going to allow us to do that, and that's also a huge HIPAA violation. And I've seen a lot of kind of like local marketing agencies try that with clients as I'm taking them on, and I'm going back in and going, oh yeah, they definitely should not have been trying any of that.
Yeah, and you talked about how you sort of started as a solo venture, and I know you've grown to a much larger team. What kind of core values or principles did you build RevKey on? I mean, when you talk about making sure that those things are done properly, how do those values kind of benefit your clients?
When we're hiring people, we're looking very specifically at character. Because one of the things that I'm asking my account managers to be is they have to be both good at Google Ads and they have to be able to talk to clients. And that's a really hard skill set to get. And so in a lot of cases, I'm hiring an account manager who has one or the other, and we're kind of having to teach the other part. But really, it's looking for character and just honestly people who are not jerks,
Hmm.
is something that's been very important to our process and culture. And so yeah, we've now, including myself, got a team of 11, and that's kind of been a very core principle, is just really making sure that whoever we're hiring for that is going to be a good person to work with and a team player.
And I imagine that that's a lot of clarity and transparency, which is something that's often missing in digital marketing. So how does that show up in the way that you communicate or even run campaigns for the therapists that you work with?
My vice president, who was doing a sales call recently, and she had taken a call from somebody who had been using a competitor of ours, and they said, well, they just don't really communicate with us, they just occasionally like send us a report, and so we're really not sure what any of these numbers mean. And whereas on the RevKey side of things, I insist that my account managers talk to all of their, accounts every single month to, be able to talk through their Google ads and say, okay, this is a good click-through rate, or this is a bad click-through rate. And, this is what we expect from conversions, to kind of be able to say, you know, are these numbers good and bad? Because in a lot of cases, you just get a report with a bunch of graphs on it, and you don't
Right.
actually know what these numbers are, or whether they indicate something good or bad for you. So I think it's that personal piece, and I think that's just lost in just a lot of digital marketing these days. Is and Probably makes it easier for those marketing agencies to have lots of customers because they don't actually have to talk to them, and to just send them reports. But ultimately, it's not good for the client.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and this episode is all about your no BS strategy. You're known for being blunt and honest and laser focused on conversions that matter. So, what does that no BS approach to Google Ads look like in practice? Like, how do you cut through the jargon and the hype of digital marketing to keep things really friendly and helpful and focused on what truly brings new patients through a therapist door?
Yeah, I think it probably starts in our sales process, and I have to probably tell 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people who want to talk to me, we get on and I have to say, honestly, your website is just not up to the task of what you're looking to do. You have the dreaded bullet point page that says couples therapy, anxiety, depression,
Right.
EMDR. That's not going to work. And so, I mean, at the minimum, it's like, okay, let's go ahead and make each one of these their own page so we can actually send ads to those, um, which is going to help your search engine optimization as well as, our ads where, if somebody types in couples therapy, I want to send them to a page that is specifically focused on couples therapy, and they can start reading it and going, oh yeah, this is exactly my issue. This is what I need, and get, that user to take the next step, which is clicking on that contact form or making that phone call. Um, so in a lot of cases, I do have to tell people that. I remember one very specifically, and it was a client in San Francisco, and I went back on Wayback Machine and I figured out that their website was 10 years old, and I was like, guys, this isn't gonna work anymore. This has got to be updated. And the owners of the practice were like, yeah, we know. We just needed somebody to tell us that this was no longer working. So, and I did that on another sales call yesterday with somebody. I was like, your website looks like it's out of 2015 and really needs an update.
Absolutely. Yeah. You and I are fairly well aligned there. I'm often telling people that they need to sweep the front porch and light a few candles before they invite all these people over. So that analogy tends to resonate.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Just because if you have that website and we start running ads to it, and you're not going to get anything, and then you're going to get mad at me. So it's not worth it for you to waste your marketing dollars, and it's not worth it for me to hear you being angry because your marketing didn't work. So got to work on the website first, and I think that's the biggest mistake that I think a lot of therapists end up making is just they start their practice and they go on and they make their own Squarespace or Wix website or WordPress, and it's just not good enough, especially in more competitive markets. If you're talking about you're in New York, you're in Los Angeles, you're in Miami, your homebrew website is just not going to do it in most
Yeah.
cases.
Absolutely. All right, we got to take a quick sponsorship break right now. When we come back, I want to get into the heart of your strategy, like what really makes the no BS approach to Google Ads work for therapists and how you can move from wasting money on clicks to attracting real clients who are ready for help. We'll be right back.
Running a med spa isn't just about beautiful results. It's about building a beautiful business, too. That's where Maven Financial Partners comes in. Maven specializes in helping wellness businesses like med spas and aesthetic clinics master their money. From tracking profitability to forecasting growth, so you can finally stop guessing and start scaling with confidence. Whether you're struggling to understand your numbers or ready to expand to your next location, Maven's team knows this industry inside and out. Grab a free business consultation today at mavenfp.com. And while you're there, order their must-read guide, MedSpa Profitability, to start transforming your practice from successful to truly scalable. That's mavenfp.com.
We're back here on the Worth Your Salt podcast with John Sanders of RevKey. And so, John, I want to talk about ethical advertising. Marketing and mental health can be really tricky. And I know you're big on marketing that respects therapists and gets results. So, what does ethical Google ad strategy mean to you in the context of a therapy practice?
Well, it's some of the things that we had talked about earlier, not doing any remarketing, not, trying to use any first party data or anything like that. But also what we're putting in ads, we're not going to, put in ads something around, best therapist. Not going to do that. That's something that, you'll see in a lot of other kind of service-based industries, but that's definitely not what most therapists want to be saying, or like advertising based on pricing or something along those lines, or making promises that that can't be kept, and just kind of avoiding a lot of that hyperbole language that goes along with advertising in a lot of cases, unfortunately.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know privacy is a huge concern also. What are some ways that you keep ad data and targeting effective without compromising client trust or sensitive information? You talked, of course, about, don't upload your first party data. We all know that. But are there other ways that you help protect privacy while still being able to target effectively?
Yeah, and also, and I think it comes down to a lot of the softwares that you end up using to for your leads, to whether they are HIPAA compliant or not. And I think that there's definitely a lot of gray area in HIPAA, unfortunately. That so some companies will say, well, we're HIPAA compliant except in X, Y, and Z cases, and so and just kind of educating customers about that. But because we don't make websites, and I do not want to get into the website making business, so we'll end up with a WordPress website, that's connected to Calendly, and then the next one is a Squarespace website that's using Acuity, and then the next one is something completely different. So we're constantly having to deal with like different web platforms and trying to make sure that that's as under HIPAA as possible.
And I know one of your principles is marketing to real people, not just like ICPs. Can you unpack that a little bit for us? How should we be thinking about our target audience in a real world way when we're trying to create Google ad campaigns? Like, what's the difference between marketing to sort of an imagined ICP versus crafting ads that speak to actual people who are searching for help?
Yeah, I think that the imaginary customer can get you into some trouble and kind of like niching down so far that like you all of a sudden don't have a customer base. I once had a customer who they said, I only want to work with women who are this age in this area who have these issues. And basically at that point, it was like your pool of potential clients is all of a sudden, a couple of hundred people. Um, so I think that you can get a little too far down the rabbit hole on niching. I think niching is great, but you can definitely take it to an extreme, and I think that that's kind of usually what that leads to. Um, but ultimately, it's getting people to click on that ad. I mean, people are going to spend 3 seconds looking at my ad, maybe, and then they're going to go to your website and they're going to spend hopefully at least 40 seconds, 50 seconds, preferably a minute, and then filling out that contact form. So they're going to spend a lot more time on your website and like making sure that that website language is also kind of aligned with what we're doing in our ads. In a lot of cases, the headlines that we will use, we will pull straight off of the website. So there is kind of some continuity there between the two.
That makes perfect sense. What about listeners who might already be running ads or using an agency and not seeing much return? And we talked a little bit about some of the reasons for that. But I know that one of your talking points is how to tell if your digital agency is failing you. So what are some red flags that a therapist should look for that might indicate their strategy isn't working?
Ultimately it's looking at your real world results to start with. If you're not getting leads and you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars on marketing, there's definitely an issue there. I think if there's one thing that you could do, and I think that this cuts across both Google search campaigns and performance max campaigns, which is kind of the newer style of Google ads, um, is there is a section in Google Ads where you can look at the search terms that people are typing in that is causing your ads to come up. And if you don't look at any other screen, if you just look at that one, and if you can look at those and go, yes, these are appropriate to my services. If you see a whole bunch of stuff that it has nothing to do with your business, you have a major problem. And that's where you're probably spending, potentially thousands of dollars a month on things that are completely irrelevant to what you're doing.
And I know you've talked a lot about some of the big changes that we saw in 2025, things like Performance Max that you mentioned, replacing old formats, shifts in cost per click, even AI starting to influence search results and ad targeting. So, for a therapist who isn't necessarily up to speed on all of these changes, what are sort of some of the key trends or updates in Google Ads that they should know about?
So Performance Max ads combined both search ads, they can also show up on YouTube, they can show up in display, they can show up in Gmail, and a lot of other places. And this is really the format that Google is preferring going forward. Really, what we've seen this year is for our traditional search campaigns, ones that started this year where they were paying $5 a click, they're now paying $10 a click on a regular basis, and they are not as effective as they were. And so in so many cases this year, we are changing customers over to Performance Max over search campaigns that were great for 2 or 3 years and now just don't work anymore, unfortunately. And so I think that that's probably the major trend. I personally think that I could see a world in 3 years where there are no longer display campaigns or search campaigns or even YouTube campaigns, and everything is just run out of that Performance Max platform, which is much more AI focused in terms of trying to find the intent of what somebody is searching. And that's one of the things I really like about Performance Max is especially for something where people don't necessarily know what to type to find that service. Whereas like you can put in a bunch of different signals. So if somebody is looking for a type of therapy that they maybe don't know what to call it, you can put in some signals and then ultimately put some ads in front of them.
Smart. That sounds like a really good strategy. All right, John, it's time for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Worth Your Salt podcast, and today I'm talking with John Sanders of RevKey, who's shedding some much-needed light on what ethical, data-driven advertising really looks like in the therapy world. So if something he's shared has sparked an idea or challenged your thinking, come find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook. We love hearing how these conversations are helping you grow your practice. We're back here on Worth Your Salt. And John, just before the break, you helped us understand the deeper why behind your approach, why agencies so often miss the mark, how to identify those red flags, and what a truly therapist-centered ad strategy really looks like. So with that groundwork, I want to turn our attention to the part everyone loves, the actionable steps and the things that practitioners can do right now to make their marketing more effective and their ads more profitable. So if a therapist already has some ads running but isn't sure they're working, what's one simple thing they could check on or tweak today to start improving results?
I think probably going in and looking at that search term report that we had talked about is just so important in both search and Performance Max ads. And then also, going into that goals section and seeing are you actually recording some of that conversion data? And if you see just a big 0 on your conversion data, most likely some sort of Google tag is not in place. Like I said, that's very complicated. I actually hired somebody this year who specializes in creating conversion tracking, just because you can see so many issues across different platforms with those things. I think that those are probably the big two things. And when it comes to agencies, I think when you're talking to them, if you're running like a small therapy practice of like 2 or 3 people and you call somebody and they say, oh, you need to spend $5,000 on Google ads every month, run away screaming. That is somebody who is really looking to do what is good for their firm, not what is good ultimately for your company. You should not be spending that much on Google ads. And I think in a lot of ways, Google really encourages that, saying, oh, well, to run a PMAX campaign, you should spend $50 a day, which is, not actually true. And so I think realizing, what your marketing budget should be and like having a realistic idea and being able to say, okay, I'm going to spend $1,000 a month and I'm going to dedicate to doing this for 6 months. I think that's important. But trying to avoid, people who are, once again, they're not going to talk to you and they're going to tell you to spend a whole lot and they're going to charge you based on how much you spend on Google every month, which to me is a really unethical way of doing pricing. And I just refuse to do it, because if the implication is that agency that does that is always just going to tell you to spend more money, which is why they want you to spend $5,000 a month, which is, ultimately not good for the customer, but it's good for them. And that's just not how things should work.
Yeah, agree 100%. The percent of ad spend as a revenue model is broken. It doesn't make any sense, at least not for the consumer. So I had a conversation with a woman this morning who had, she's a therapist, and she had basically lost her shirt on Google ads, and she had a little bit of PTSD there. I have been in that situation myself. So for those who have never tried Google ads, who had a bad experience, how can they kind of dip their toes in the water without feeling overwhelmed or wasting money in that way? What would you advise a therapist who's intimidated by this process to do first?
I think it is much like what we had talked about with a website or if you're looking for legal advice or if you're looking for tax help, is to hire a professional to do this, because there's a lot of ways that Google has put in that will waste your money on things. I had mentioned search partners at the top of the podcast, these third-party companies, and that's a default within Google when you create a search campaign, is to to put your ads on those. In a lot of cases, those are not good clicks, and a lot of these recommendations that Google makes are maybe good for Google to collect data, but they're really not good for your business ultimately. And I think, ultimately, and I think that this is why marketers like me will continue to have jobs, is because Google's main priority is always going to be to maximize their revenue. Their second priority is going to be helping you get customers. And so we need to flip that. So you need somebody who's going to look at Google and say, no, I'm not going to take that recommendation. No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do this. And, kind of getting it down to where you are serving your ads to people who are actually potentially actionable customers, and not, accidentally putting ads on, you know, children's video games, or, websites that have nothing to do with what you're doing.
Yeah. So, what kind of advice would you have for a therapist who's kind of DIYing it right now? Like obviously the best of all possible worlds is to hire a professional, but if they have limited time and energy, where should they focus to get the best results? Like, are there areas of Google Ads where you'd tell them as a DIYer, don't mess with too much here? Like things that might be better left to leave until they can get professional help?
Oh, absolutely. So, and if you've ever talked to a Google Ads rep who has called you to talk to you about your Google Ads, they're typically going to tell you to go into this auto apply panel, and they're going to want you to select a bunch of options. Do not do it. Because in a lot of cases, you do not have the data and you don't really have an understanding of like what they're asking you to do. Is that I would avoid a lot of that panel to start with, and making sure that you have things like negative keywords in your campaigns. So when somebody types in therapist near me, that you're also not showing on massage therapist near me. Um, and just some simple things like that. If you're doing Performance Max, which is, we've gotten a lot more information on Performance Max this year, which is great. Um, but it can still serve those ads in some places that we don't want. And so really kind of looking at like what channels your ads are actually showing in. Are they showing on search? Are they showing on YouTube? Are they showing on display? Still mainly want them to show on search, because ultimately that's where people are coming in and saying, stating their intent, versus, just seeing your ad on a website or seeing your ad as they're scrolling through YouTube.
And I know you emphasize having that solid foundation. We talked about, having a great website and an effective intake process, follow up in place before
Yes.
you start running the ads. So, what should people be double checking if you're a therapist and you're looking at your website? What should you be making sure you have or don't have on your website in order to start bringing in those clicks and making those clicks turn into patients?
It gets down to a lot of like some of the basic web design of, having those color blocks, having some images on the page that make sense. I do see a lot of nonsense images, as I'm going through people's sites, like, just ceramic birds and trees. I'm like, I'm not sure what this has to do with couples counseling at all. So I think it's some of that. And I think that the issue, especially for a lot of people, is because they have made their own websites and they really like their website and they put a lot of work into it. And sometimes I will tell people, hey, this website, not very good, not getting the job done. And they act like I've just insulted their firstborn child.
Yes.
And that's not what this is about. I know you worked hard on it, but and being able to, have a couple of other people look at it and like give you an honest opinion, and we can also see that with some statistics in Google Analytics. If people are spending more than a minute on your website, okay, your website's probably in a decent place. If people are getting to your website and they're spending 30 seconds on your website, you're probably missing some very critical pieces of content that need to be put in play before you consider running Google Ads.
I love that idea of data-driven analysis at the website. It's not just my opinion, it's not just how it looks, but this is what the data is telling us. That's really smart. John, I know everyone listening is wondering how to get in touch with you. So where can we find you? Where can we connect with you?
Sure, you can go to revkey.com. That's REVKEY.com/podcasts. And, you can, like we've been talking about here, you can fill out that form and, you can have a sales call with myself or my VP, Kate Weiss, and we can kind of walk you through all of these, whether you're ready for ads and if not, what you can do to kind of get ready for those.
Perfect. And of course, if you want to learn more about John and RevKey, we will link everything up in our show notes on saltmarketing.co. But John, it is time for our lightning round questions. These are a few quick questions that I like to ask of every guest. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So my first question is, what's something about you that often surprises people?
Especially when I go to conferences and, I'm running around in Slacks, people will be surprised to learn that I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons nerd. You can actually probably see some of that in the background of the camera shot right now. And I love running role-playing game campaigns. So
Interesting. All right. So shifting gears, what's your favorite thing about the work that you do?
I love hearing stories, especially from some clients who I've had for a long time, of how they started out as a solo practitioner and now have, 3 offices and 20 people working for them. And it kind of parallels some of the stuff that I've done as well, starting out solo in 2018, now having a team of 11. And so it's really gratifying to kind of hear like those stories of how those businesses have been built kind of in parallel with mine.
Growth is always rewarding in our clients and in ourselves, for sure. All right. And I know you and I talked about this one before the show, but what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
So I've thought about this one, and I think I learned not from advice that I was given, but early in my career, having a number of really bad managers and seeing like all of the mistakes they made and looking at it going, okay, don't do that to your people. Don't do this to your people. And so like I had a lot of good examples of what not to do, which I think has led my company to a place of, doing what we're supposed to be doing, with clients and employees.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, and I always used to tell my kids that everybody in life has something to teach you. When they would come across a coach or a teacher that wasn't necessarily their cup of tea, I would say they have something to teach you, and maybe that's who you don't want to be.
Right.
That's great. That's great advice.
Exactly.
All right, last question. Who is inspiring you right now? What podcast are you listening to, or what's the best book that you've read recently?
Probably Making Sense by Sam Harris is probably the podcast I listen to the most in terms of, I kind of agree with him politically, but also just in terms of like life philosophy. Like he recently talked about like why he got off social media, and I'm not a huge social media fan myself, which is weird for a marketing person to say.
Right.
It's true.
Right. Yeah.
And how like it's not always great for your mental health, and I've really kind of come around to that view in the last couple of years, is that it seems like people are spending little too much time in Instagram world and on TikTok and maybe not out here in the real world with the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Self-governance is a big deal. Not too much doom scrolling, right? All right, John, thank you so much for joining me today on Worth Your Salt. I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate the invite.
I also want to thank you, Salt Nation. And of course, if today's conversation has you thinking I'm ready to take my marketing to the next level, that's exactly what we're here for at Salt Marketing. Our Salted Edge system is designed to help wellness practitioners like you attract new clients, convert them into loyal fans, and finally get marketing that works without the guesswork. If you have a great success story, I'd love to talk with you and share your story. So tell us why you're worth your salt by emailing us at grow@saltmarketing.co. Of course, be sure to subscribe to Worth Your Salt so you never miss an episode. Finally, leave us a review or give the show a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's all for this episode of Worth Your Salt. Be sure to join me again next time. In the meantime, let's get out there and shake things up.